Okay, so I was walking to the light rail past that weird public art installation on 3rd and Pine. You know the one, the mosaic of a rat and what looks like a raccoon that got hit by a car and then someone taxidermied it badly. And it hit me. This thing is the most honest political statement Seattle has ever made. It's not a metaphor. It's a literal summoning. Our entire civic dysfunction, the city council meetings that go until 2 a.m., the progressive policy that somehow ends with Amazon getting a tax break, it's all explainable if you accept that we are haunted by a cryptid I'm calling the Trash Chimera. Rat energy plus deformed raccoon energy. Chaotic, resourceful, nocturnal, and absolutely convinced it deserves your compost.
I'm going to ask this with genuine concern. Did you take Adderall that wasn't prescribed to you, or did you just stare directly at the sun for an hour?
Neither. I mean, I had a cold brew that may have been mislabeled as a nitro, but that's beside the point. Think about it, Rollo. Cryptid energy is the only framework that can explain why we can't fix potholes, but we can franchise a monorail to nowhere. Mothman showed up before the Silver Bridge collapse. El Chupacabra stalks places where governance has failed. Our Trash Chimera isn't just a sculpture. It's an emergent property of a city whose zoning code is 800 pages and still allows a single-family home next to a data center.
So you're telling me that the city's inability to open a public bathroom without a 6-month environmental review is because of a haunted mosaic?
I'm saying the mosaic is the physical manifestation of a deeper cryptozoological principle. Every city has its ruling cryptid, the one that embodies the shadow self of its electorate. New York has the pizza rat, which is aspirational individualism collapsing under its own ambition. Portland had the exploding whale, a cautionary tale about hubris and crowdsourced solutions. Seattle's is this liminal trash gremlin that is both victim and architect of its own garbage pile. And if we can understand the cryptid, we can understand the dysfunction. It's a unified theory.
You know, I want to push back on the substance here, but first I need you to define cryptid energy. Like I'm a normal person who didn't spend the pandemic watching YouTube videos about the Fresno Nightcrawler.
Fair. Cryptid energy is the ambient, low-level supernatural static generated when a system is so complex and contradictory that it becomes indistinguishable from a folk monster. It's when the Department of Planning and Development processes a permit for a giant skull, and nobody notices because it's just another Thursday. It's the feeling you get when a scooter is hanging from a telephone wire, and you're not sure if it's art, a statement about gentrification, or a glitch in the simulation. That's cryptid energy. It's the universe's way of telling you that the rational actor model has left the chat.
Okay, I hate that I'm about to validate this, but I do remember when the city tried to remove that gantry crane from the waterfront, and a family of raccoons had moved into the control cab. And the Port Authority had to call a wildlife biologist because the union contract didn't cover possessed heavy machinery. That felt less like an animal infestation and more like a visitation.
Exactly. That's not an anecdote. That's a data point. You're looking at the exact same phenomenon I'm describing, but you're still pretending it's materialist. The raccoons were emissaries. They were telling us, you think you're decommissioning this industrial relic, but we've been running the night shift here since 1927. And the city just accepted it. Because on some level, everyone knows the cryptid is a co-equal branch of local government.
So the Trash Chimera is basically a veto point. Like the Seattle City Council has 9 members, but the quorum is 10, and the 10th is this mosaic raccoon that communicates via tipped-over green bins and cryptic scratch marks on a zoning variance.
You're making my argument for me now. Yes! And that's why I'm calling this episode Hot Cryptid Summer. Because we're not just talking about Seattle. We're living through a national moment where the official narrative has become so untethered from reality that everyone, left, right, center, is experiencing cryptid energy. The Gulf of America is a cryptid. Doge is a cryptid. The /Trump coin that soared and cratered is a digital jackalope. J.D. Vance's entire childless cat lady discourse was a failed attempt to summon a moral panic cryptid that his own base had already domesticated.
Wait, go back. You're saying the Trump administration's policy platform has the same ontological status as a blurry photo of Bigfoot?
I'm saying that when the executive branch tries to relabel a body of water and the maps update, not because of a geological survey, but because of a vibes-based executive order, we have entered an area where the map and the territory are being mediated by a troll under a bridge. That's not governance, that's a summoning ritual. And the weird part, the part I want to spend the whole show on, is that the cryptid doesn't even hide anymore. It runs for office. It launches a meme coin. It gets a Super Bowl commercial. We're not in the era of secret monsters. We're in the era of unapologetic cryptids holding press conferences. And half the country is just watching to see if it'll knock over a podium.
So this summer, instead of Brat Summer, we're doing Hot Cryptid Summer. The vibe shift is from neon green hedonism to accepting that the national project is now being administered by a Sasquatch with a Truth Social account.
More Hydra than Sasquatch, but yes. And the trick is, once you accept the cryptid unified theory, you stop being surprised. Of course, the Supreme Court grants immunity for official acts, and then the president floats a third term. The cryptid isn't bound by the Constitution. It's bound by campfire rules. It can only be defeated by someone figuring out the specific riddle that makes it vanish. Or by daylight. And we haven't seen political daylight in years.
I'll give you this. It explains the polling better than Nate Silver ever did. How is this race tied? The undecided voter is trying to remember if you're supposed to throw salt over your shoulder or refuse to look the candidate in the eyes. The whole electorate is just doing cryptid risk management.
Exactly. And the mosaic in Seattle? That's not a joke. It's a case study. So for the rest of the show, we're going to apply cryptid energy to everything. The AI boom, the housing market, the collapse of the French government, the pommel horse guy. Every headline from the past year is a trail cam photo. We just didn't have the lens to see it.
All right. I reserve the right to call this a break from reality, but I'm in. If only because the alternative is believing any of this is happening on purpose. By the way, you didn't answer the Adderall question.
That's between me and my cryptid physician. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Trash Chimera compostable bin liners. They biodegrade in landfills, but more importantly, they don't offend the raccoon deity that watches over your neighborhood's alley. Use code CRYPTID for 10% off your first ritual offering. We're back, and I just want to note that our sponsor, Trash Chimera compostable bin liners, used the promo code CRYPTID. So we're now officially part of the cryptid industrial complex.
Look, I'm just saying, if a raccoon deity wants to endorse our ad reads, that's between you and the algorithm. But speaking of cryptids and the economy of attention, I've been diving into something fascinating that's happening across small-town America. And I think it might be the only growth sector that doesn't rely on selling user data or Trump tariffs.
Oh no, you're about to pitch me a municipal bond for Mothman statues again, aren't you?
Hear me out. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a town of barely 4,000 people. They've built an entire seasonal economy around a single sighting from 1966. Mothman Festival, Mothman Museum, Mothman-themed coffee shop where you can get a latte with red-eyed foam. The statue in the middle of town isn't even retro-futurist ironic. It's just a giant chrome Mothman with a six-pack. And it works. It brings in 50,000 visitors a year. That's 10 times the local population coming to buy t-shirts.
Right, and they all go home with a plushie and a vague sense that they've participated in Appalachian folklore. It's enshittification of the paranormal. The actual local legend gets sanded down into a Funko Pop. But I guess it's better than the fentanyl economy, so fine, I'm listening.
That's the thing. This isn't just Mothman. Every town with a weird historical footnote is trying to monetize it. The Jersey Devil, southern New Jersey's Pine Barrens cryptid, now has a pizza place called Jersey Devil Pizza with a hoofprint logo. Escape rooms, breweries. Lizard Man of Scape-Ore Swamp in South Carolina got a festival. The Loveland Frogman in Ohio has a musical. Cryptid tourism is the new roadside attraction, and I'm starting to think it's a legitimate form of place-based economic development. It's sticky. People drive hours for this stuff, and they leave money behind in diners and motels that would otherwise be shuttered.
So the thesis is that weird local myths are the last bastion of non-extractive tourism, because you can't outsource a statue of a winged mammal with glowing eyes to a chatbot. But let me ask you a question, Marty. What happens when the vibe shifts? Because I've watched the very demure, very mindful tote bag saga play out in real time, and I think it's the same attention economy, just dressed in a moth suit.
Wait, okay, I know the phrase became a TikTok meme in 2024, and then there were tote bags, but explain the collapse.
The creator, Jules LeBron, makes a satirical video about being demure and mindful at work. It goes mega viral, she trademarked the phrase immediately, smart move, and within weeks there's an official merch drop with tote bags selling for $40. All over my feeds, people are buying them as irony signalers, right? A tote that says very demure is a joke about professionalism, about the performance of propriety. But then the trend life cycle hit its terminal phase. By December 2024, you could get those totes for $5 on the clearance rack at some pop-up that was already pivoting to Hawk Tuah hats. The bags are now, I assume, insulating a landfill. The cryptid tourist towns are doing the same thing but with physical infrastructure, building a whole downtown around a meme. What happens when the internet gets bored of Mothman because something shinier, like, I don't know, a deep-sea blob discovered by an AI submarine, captures the algorithm?
I think that's a different category. Cryptid economies aren't purely digital. There's a steady, almost analog appeal to them. Point Pleasant's festival has been running since 2002, long before TikTok. It survived the death of MySpace, the fin de siècle ennui of the early 2010s, and the pivot to video. The demand isn't driven by an influencer cycle. It's driven by a deep human need for local weirdness. Kids want to see the big moth. It's like a secular pilgrimage.
I'd buy that if the towns weren't also aggressively juicing the algorithm. You've got the mayor of Point Pleasant doing TikTok dance challenges with the Mothman statue. It's not just a quiet pilgrimage, it's a full-blown Instagram trap. They're not immune to the attention economy, they're just a slower-burning version of it. And the very demure tote bag is a warning. Commodified irony has a shelf life. Once the town's whole identity is we have the weird creature, it becomes a brand, and brands have to keep reinventing to stay relevant. What does the Jersey Devil do when the Gen Alpha cryptid influencers move on to something else?
But that's exactly why I'm pitching a Seattle stimulus package. We need a cryptid that's already got permanent brand equity, something that can't be memed out of existence. I'm talking about Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the Pacific Northwest's original apex haunting. I'm suggesting we issue municipal Sasquatch bonds to fund a network of elevated canopy walkways in the Cascades, where tourists can search for signs with trained guides. We build a world-class Sasquatch interpretive center in Snoqualmie, a research grant program for cryptozoologists. This isn't a pop-up tote bag. It's a civic commitment to the mysterious.
Dude, you're literally describing an infrastructure bill for a creature that doesn't exist. And I'm the socialist here? But go on. How do you prevent this from becoming just another luxury real estate play, masquerading as a public works project? Because I've seen how Sasquatch crossings turn into Sasquatch View condos with a coffee shop downstairs selling $20 avocado toast on a log slab.
I'm saying you regulate it like a public utility. The research grants go to a democratically governed trust that can't be bought by Airbnb hosts. The walking trails are free for locals, and the Sasquatch Interpretive Center is run by a nonprofit. The whole thing is designed to capture the tourist dollar and recycle it into the community, not into some hedge fund's hospitality portfolio. It's the kind of thing we could have done with the World's Fair legacy money if we hadn't blown it on a monorail that goes nowhere useful.
Okay, but the monorail is already a cryptid, a ghost of transit past. But I think your heart's in the right place, and I see the logic. Cryptid tourism is a reliable extractor of out-of-town wealth because it's inherently scarce. You can't clone the Mothman mystery without looking like a poser. But what you're proposing is a high-capital way to turn that into a permanent municipal asset. And my fear is that the very demure tote bag logic will eventually apply. All it takes is one national segment on Sasquatch hoaxers caught with gorilla suits, and the whole bond rating collapses. The attention economy's most brutal feature is the rug pull of disenchantment.
Sure, but the counterexample is Roswell. The alien autopsy tape was debunked. The weather balloon story is laughable. And yet Roswell, New Mexico still draws hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. The crash didn't happen, but the economy did. The brand survived the death of its factual premise. That's the dream, post-truth tourism. The city builds a narrative infrastructure so durable that fact checks bounce off. Mothman can't be debunked because the original sighting was already so ambiguous, it's practically a Zen koan. I think Seattle's Sasquatch is even better positioned because it's fuzzy, literally and figuratively. No one expects to see it, but everyone wants to try.
Right. So you're essentially betting on the longevity of a collective hallucination. And I have to admit, as a DSA guy who wants to decommodify housing but also fund libraries, the thought of a city budget propped up by Sasquatch-themed TIF districts is so perfectly late capitalist that I might have to support it ironically. I just want to make sure the very demure lesson is internalized. Don't make the tote bag before you have the myth. And don't let a venture-funded demure tech platform turn the cryptid into a short position. Because I can already see the pitch deck. SASCAS, Scalable Cryptid Experience. No thanks.
I promise, no sass. Just a bronze statue of a large, hairy footprint and a solemn annual festival where we all agreed that we didn't see anything, but we felt a presence. And maybe a special tax on any influencer who uses the word liminal while standing in a forest. That's my stimulus package. We're going to run on it in the next city council recall.
All right, I'm in favor of taxing the liminal, and I'll vote for the Sasquatch bonds if the first tranche is called the Squatch Offering. But I reserve the right to say this is just grift with extra steps.
Noted. More steps, maybe, but at least they're on a sustainably built cedar boardwalk. So, we just spent 10 minutes inventing a municipal Sasquatch security, and now I'm looking at my phone and the algorithm has served me 3 different 17-year-olds dressed as Mothmen. And I think our Cedar Boardwalk Futures Exchange already has more real-world infrastructure than whatever this is.
Welcome to Cryptidcore, the TikTok subculture for people who want to look like they lost a fistfight in a spirit Halloween and then wandered into a bog to recover. It's the logical endpoint of a society that has fully given up on being perceived as competent.
Okay, but I think there's something happening here that's bigger than a fashion trend. I've been reading some data on the collapse of institutional trust. Gallup's numbers on confidence in the media, government, big business, all of it. And there's this parallel rise in what researchers call aestheticized decay. When the official world feels like a monster, people start identifying with the monsters. Cryptidcore is basically just saying, I'd rather be a known unknown than a known liar.
Sure, I'd rather be a chupacabra than a McKinsey consultant, but that's just the low bar of the century. My problem is that Cryptid Core takes this impulse and strips it for parts. It turns "I'm ungovernable" into a muted earth tone sweater with intentional grease stains and a pair of prosthetic goat legs from Etsy. It's radicalism that's been pre-pathologized into a merch drop. You can't scare the state by looking like you forage for a living if you also use Afterpay to do it.
No, I know, but that's true of literally everything under platform capitalism. Everything gets strip-mined for aesthetic. The question is whether the kids doing it are feeling something real that could tip into an actual political impulse. Because the look isn't just "I'm dirty," it's "I'm illegible." Blurry photos, night vision footage, dashing out of frame. In a panopticon, being a cryptid is a form of refusing to be data. That's not nothing.
I'll grant you the illegibility part. It's the same reason people are plastic bagging their faces in protest footage. But with Cryptid Core, the illegibility is being sold back to you as a lifestyle bundle. You're not a blur. You're a blur with a discount code for ethically sourced fake moss. The aesthetic carries a hand-signed permission slip that says, "Don't worry, this is just a phase. I'm still employable when the economy needs me." That's resignation, not rebellion. I'm convinced half these people just really want to be extras in a low-budget horror film and get health insurance.
Okay, but maybe that's a valid adaptation. If the system has made stable adulthood so unappealing, housing costs, climate collapse, a job market that feels like a subscription service for burnout, opting into feral bog creature identity is a rational rejection of all available scripts. You know my favorite Cryptid Core artifact? The moss bag ASMR videos? Just people lying down in the woods wearing a duffel bag of damp peat. It's the opposite of a hustle grind morning routine. It's saying, I will become humus.
I see the attraction. I mean, I've definitely had days where my retirement plan is return to soil. But the moss bag is still being filmed for engagement. The algorithm rewards de-optimization as optimization. You film your decay to build a following so you can monetize your anti-productivity, and suddenly you're a brand called Feral Girl Official. That's not hummus. That's just influencer culture wearing a rotted pumpkin as a hat.
Wait, go back though. You're treating the economic infrastructure as a dispositive argument against the authenticity of the feeling, and I think that's a category error. People felt genuine despair in the 14th century during the plague, and they expressed it through danse macabre paintings that were commissioned by rich patrons. That the expression has a commercial layer doesn't negate the despair. Cryptid Core is a danse macabre for the attention economy. The monster is us.
Fine, I'll accept the dance macabre framework because it makes me sound like I'm in a Ken Burns documentary. But I still think there's a difference between art that stares into the abyss and a trend that applies a sepia filter to the abyss and calls it cozy rustic horror. The dance macabre didn't promise you could buy the skeleton's cloak at a pop-up. Cryptid Core feels less like a reckoning with decay and more like a warm bath in it, a resignation that says, things are collapsing, so I will become cute collapse.
That's the exact line, though. Is it resignation or is it prefigurative? Because if you can't imagine a future where institutions are rehabilitated, you start building identity around surviving the ruins. The cryptid is a monster of the margins. It lives in the spaces the map doesn't cover. For a generation that's been denied a coherent map, that's aspirational. I keep thinking about that phrase you see in the comments. I am simply a creature. It's a refusal to be human in the way the system demands, which is always legible, productive, and credit scored.
I am simply a creature is just the new I'm baby, but with more detritus. And I say that as someone who likes detritus. My concern is that the creaturehood being sold is completely sterilized. A real cryptid, like the actual folkloric creature, was a warning. You saw a thing in the woods and you knew you'd transgressed a boundary, or something in nature was deeply wrong. Mothman showed up before a bridge collapse. The modern cryptid is just a vibe with no prophecy. Nobody's going, I'm forest dwelling and I'm here to announce the impending foreclosure crisis. They're going, here's my outfit for being unperceived.
But maybe the prophecy is the vibe. The prophecy is that we're all going to be living in makeshift shelters in the woods within a decade because nothing is affordable. So you might as well get good at looking like you belong there. It's pre-traumatic stress disorder fashion. I'm not saying it's going to build a political movement, but it's a shared aesthetic language for a future that people feel is already foreclosed. That's not nothing. The brain rot isn't just that we watch too many TikToks. It's that we've lost the ability to distinguish between a warning and a mood board.
I buy that. The blurring of warning and mood board is the essential cultural condition of the 2020s. But I'll push back on one thing. You said it's not building a movement, and that's exactly my beef. Because from where I sit, the people doing the most to fight foreclosure crises and evictions are not dressed as gelatinous swamp entities. They're in municipal courtrooms, holding manila folders. The aesthetic might make you feel like a disruptive monster, but the system doesn't care if your disruption is accessorized. It cares if you block the bulldozer. And cryptidcore makes you look like you're waiting for the bulldozer to become a nice shady ruin.
That's fair, but I'm not sure the choice is binary. You either block the bulldozer or you make art about the bulldozer ruining you. Sometimes people need a period of collective grieving before they can do the blocking, and the grieving comes out as weird pagan mourning rituals on social media. I'm not going to tell a kid who's watched every institution fail that she should stop pretending to be a shapeshifter and go organize a tenant union. Maybe the shapeshifting is the first step towards saying, the world you built for me is a lie, so I'll make my own taxonomy. It's not enough, but I don't think it's the enemy.
All right, I'll concede that the taxonomy building has more value than I originally gave it. Mostly because you're pathologizing it as a mourning ritual. And I can't argue with mourning rituals without sounding like the kind of guy who yells at cathedrals. But if anyone tries to sell me a certified cryptid NFT or a decentralized autonomous organization for Sasquatches, I'm burning it all down and starting a new aesthetic called Just Say No to the Woods.
That's the spirit. We'll call it Reject Core, and it's just a button-down shirt and a clip-on tie, worn ironically to signal you've given up on giving up. The ad revenue will be immense. Okay, so after we hung up last night, I fell down one of those internet holes that makes you question whether the Enlightenment was a good idea. I was reading about that shape-shifting as grief thing and somehow ended up on a subreddit where people openly discuss being sexually attracted to Mothman.
Oh, finally. Finally, this show is worthwhile. I thought we were going to do another week of tariff analysis and I was going to walk into the ocean.
I'm serious. There's a whole community. They call themselves, I had to write this down, monster fuckers. Which is blunt, I'll give them that. But I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, is this just another data point in the great American psychological unraveling? Or is there something structurally interesting here?
There is, and his name is Mothman. Do you understand the physique? Everyone fixates on the red reflective eyes, which is fair. They're arresting. They have a certain, I could warn you about a bridge collapse or burn your soul intensity. But the chest on Mothman is a cathedral. 10 feet of winged chitinous, possibly furry, that's the debate, eco-terrorism. He doesn't just fly, he looms. You don't see him, you feel yourself being seen by him. And that's a power dynamic. People pay therapists thousands of dollars to get into that kind of stuff.
You've thought about this.
I've thought about this more than I've thought about any policy proposal since 2019, because it's the only thing that makes sense anymore. You know what? I'm going to say it. The left-right divide is nothing compared to the divide between people who aesthetically appreciate Mothman and people who are cowards.
Okay, wait, but I swear there's a serious angle here. Stick with me. We've got a country where trust in institutions is in the single digits, where every cultural signal is at war with itself. You've got young people who can't afford housing, the planet's cooking, and the government just renamed the Gulf of Mexico because a guy thought it sounded better. So people start retreating into impossibly niche desires. Cryptids, aliens, ethereal beings, as a way to say, nothing you built appeals to me. So I'm going to find something that literally cannot exist in this world and pour my longing into that. It's the same morning ritual, but now it's horny.
So you're pathologizing it again. Great. Last episode, it was mourning through shapeshifting. This week, it's mourning through wanting to be princess carried by a Wendigo. I will say, if you aren't at least a little curious what Mothman's wings feel like wrapped around you during a Midwestern power outage, you're not paying attention to the texture of the world. But your point about things that literally cannot exist is half right. The appeal is that cryptids aren't compromised. Bigfoot doesn't tweet. The Jersey Devil isn't running a scam coin on Solana. There's a purity to monster desire that institutional life has completely shredded.
Right, and that's what I mean about a policy lens. I'm not kink-shaming. I'm saying if you've got enough people seeking intimacy with the explicitly unreal, that's a lagging indicator for the real has become intolerable. So do we fix the real, or do we, and I'm spitballing here, do we lean into it and create a public-facing cryptid that can serve as a unifying figure? You said it yourself. Mothman bridges divides.
If we want to save the country, we need a cryptid with bipartisan crossover appeal. Mothman has the edgy coastal vibe, but might spook the heartland. The Flatwoods monster has an incredible silhouette, pleated metallic robes, spade-shaped head, but skews too retro-futurist for the mainstream. What you really want is a Sasquatch with kind eyes. I'm telling you, a Bigfoot who looks like he'd help you move a couch. You put him on a poster with the word unite, and it's over. Election cycle solved.
There's a ballot access question. Is he a natural-born citizen? Where does he file his FEC paperwork? Are we sure his forest dwelling doesn't disqualify him under the emoluments clause?
Please, half of Congress doesn't know where they live either, and he's been here longer than most of them. The real question is whether his platform is just roar and disappear into the tree line, which beats the last two Democratic stump speeches.
But think about the coalition. You'd get the environmentalists because he's an apex forest dweller. You'd get the libertarians because he doesn't pay taxes. You'd get the trad crowd because his whole aesthetic is return to monkey. There's something here. I hate that there's something.
There's absolutely something, because everyone is exhausted. The tariffs, the egg prices, the 12-hour TikTok ban that felt like we'd lost a limb. People want someone who can just loom with moral authority. We've had presidents who bluster, presidents who speechify, but we've never had a president who could stand on a ridge at dusk, backlit by forest fire smoke, and make you feel both terrified and protected. That's the energy we're missing.
I came here to discuss the degradation of public trust, and you've turned it into a campaign for an eldritch horror.
Because the degradation of public trust is a boring problem you've been talking about for 3 years, and it hasn't fixed anything. But when I told my roommate I wanted Mothman to throw me into the Ohio River, she didn't ask about my tax bracket. She just nodded. There's a connection there that your policy briefs will never achieve. Maybe the real infrastructure week is the friends we made along the way who also want to date with a winged harbinger.
Okay, but new thought. You do realize that when we eventually discover extraterrestrial life, or even just an unidentified deep-sea creature, there's going to be an immediate faction of people who want to, quote, smash. And governments will need protocols for this. The State Department has no framework for interstellar interspecies diplomacy mixed with mass public thirst.
The Geneva Convention is wholly unprepared for the what if aliens are hot question. And you know the first congressional hearing on this will be a disaster. Some senator from Florida will demand the alien testify because he's convinced it's from Venezuela. Meanwhile, the FDA will classify extraterrestrial intimacy as a supplement.
The Center for Disease Control just releases a sheet, Safer Ghoul Practices, and everyone ignores it because a monster fucker will never be advised, only validated.
And that's the policy failure. Not that they're not trying, but that they've missed the core appeal. You can't regulate desire. You can only hope to channel it into something that doesn't end up as a meme coin. So here's my proposal. We abandon the two-party system, we put a hot cryptid on the ballot in 2028, and we finally find out if a country that can't agree on whether the Gulf of America is a joke can agree on a creature with a wingspan that makes you feel things.
I want to argue, but I just saw a poll that said 19% of Gen Z would definitely consider voting for a candidate who isn't human if the vibes were right.
Vote Mothman. Because if we're going to be terrified of the future anyway, at least let the fear be sexy.
We're going to lose our nonprofit status over this segment.
Worth it.
So, after that Mothman endorsement you just pulled out of nowhere, I've been thinking, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Seattle is in a genuine vibe crisis. Doom loop of tech layoffs, smoke season, $8 eggs. The Kraken aren't even good anymore.
They were never good. But tell me more about this crisis you've invented.
I'm serious. Voter turnout for the last city council special election was like 22%. People have given up. They think nothing matters. So I started wondering, what if we ran a cryptid for mayor? Not as a joke, as a symbolic candidate. Someone who isn't a real estate developer, a tech billionaire, or a career politician tweeting about vibrancy. Someone who lives in the woods and howls at the moon.
You just described half the residents of the Olympic Peninsula, but I see where you're going.
The Bat Squatch. Hear me out. Seattle has its own cryptid. Huge, hairy, leathery wings, allegedly spotted near Mount St. Helens. It's been dormant for decades, but the mythology is perfect. It's a creature of the Cascadia subduction zone, literal seismic energy. A mayor that embodies the existential threat of the big one.
Finally, a candidate who truly understands the city will be destroyed by a 9.0 earthquake. And we should all just embrace nihilism. I'm in.
Exactly. And he's anti-establishment by nature. He doesn't file expense reports, can't be lobbied because he only communicates in high-pitched screeches.
But here's the thing, Marty. You make your little centrist pitch. Vote Cryptid. He'll unite us. No. The reason I'm endorsing Bat Squatch is that he's the only candidate who genuinely hates bike lanes. I mean, truly, viscerally hates them. He has a wingspan of like 20 feet. He can't fit in a protected bicycle lane. He's constantly getting clipped by those green poles. He sees bike lanes as a personal affront to his airborne mobility.
Wait, so you're endorsing Bat Squatch because of a single-issue anti-bike lane platform?
It's not anti-bike lane, it's pro-air corridor. We need to decongest the skies. Seattle's airspace is dominated by Amazon delivery drones and a surprisingly aggressive flock of crows. Bat Squatch will establish a Department of Winged Transit, the DWT.
That's insane. I'm the one who proposed a cryptid mayor to restore civic engagement, and you've turned it into a NIMBY airspace war.
Look, you can't talk about Seattle's vibe crisis without mentioning how the city spent $200 million on bike lanes used by 3 lycra-clad dads and a guy who thinks he's in the Tour de France. Bat Squatch, by his very existence, rejects ground-based infrastructure. He represents a return to a more primal, chaotic mode of transportation, flapping wildly and hoping for the best. That's the spirit of Seattle innovation.
I mean, the data does show bike lane infrastructure reduces congestion in the long run. But I'll concede a giant flying ape bear thing has a certain anti-establishment appeal. And let's be real, the current mayor has a 28% approval rating. A bat squatch could literally nap in the Space Needle and outperform that.
There's no could. He already does. I've seen him. Up there, just knocking back a Rainier tall boy.
And think of the fundraising. No super PAC can touch a cryptid. You can't indict a creature that doesn't legally exist. It's the ultimate campaign finance loophole. He can take unlimited, unreported contributions in the form of raw salmon and forest berries.
And he'd be immune to all those smear ads. Bat Squatch wants to raise your property taxes. No, Bat Squatch doesn't know what property taxes are. He lives in a lava tube. Bat Squatch supports defunding the police. He doesn't even know what a police is. He just screeches and eats huckleberries. He can't smear something that has no concept of human civilization.